But the degree of inequality and the equality of opportunity are markedly different in different countries. Says something. It says it's not just market forces. Something else is going on, and that something else is how we shape market forces. Or to put it another way, markets don't exist in a vacuum. Our legal frameworks determine how markets work. And that's important for those of you who are students because we sometimes ignore important details of our economic legal framework. We ignore the role of bankruptcy laws or competition laws, corporate governance laws, and these can have a first order importance in both the way our economy operates and on the distribution of income. I'll come back and give you a few examples in a few minutes, but first I wanted to make two comments about some common perceptions, one of them part of standard economic theory, the other not quite so. One part that's not quite a standard part of economic theory, but part of the political rhetoric, is we shouldn't care about inequality itself. We shouldn't care about the fact that those at the top are doing very well, because the benefits trickle down to everybody. And this is called, for those of you who know, trickle-down economics. In many ways, I wish it were true, because if it were true, given how much wealth is at the top, everybody would be very well off. But what's been happening in the United States, and again in some other countries, is that the inequality has grown to the point that while the top is doing very well, most Americans are not. When I say that, the median income now in the United States is the same as it was in 1995, 17 years ago. So the bottom half of America has not participated in any growth. And this was true even before the crisis. It's been made worse by the crisis, and I'll come back to that as well. So, and there are other numbers that are even worse. The median income of a full-time working male in the United States are lower than they were in 1968. So there's been almost a half century of stagnation. And the only reason why things are not worse is the average number of hours worked per household has gone up. So in many ways, if you want to understand some of the peculiar things going on in American politics, one interpretation of that is there's a lot of, there ought to be a lot of discontentment about what's happening in the economics. But the other idea I wanted to mention is some of you, probably most of you, studied the prevalent theory of explaining why we have inequality, or prevalent theory describing why we the distribution of income, and that's the marginal productivity theory. Marginal productivity theory is the standard theory that's been used for over 150 years to explain, or some people might say, justify inequalities in our society. Well, in a way, the crisis undermined the credibility of that theory, undermined belief in that theory, because what we saw in that crisis were the bankers walking away with huge bonuses, and yet we all knew that their contribution to their firms was negative, and their contribution to our global economy was vastly negative. They had brought our whole global economy to the brink of ruin. So how could you say that they had a positive marginal productivity? I sometimes jokingly say, well, they just made a sign mistake, and you know, it was very large, and they forgot that it was supposed to be positively, not negatively related to productivity. So, but in any case, the point is that anybody looking at what has happened happened in that instance clearly show that the incomes were not related to their social contribution. It's a more general phenomenon. When you look at the design of compensation schemes, more generally, so-called performance-based schemes, you cannot justify them by any model of rational behavior. And I've written about that quite extensively, a paper I wrote with Barry Nailduff, trying to talk about the optimal design of compensation schemes, and the compensation schemes used by the banks, and most CEOs, most corporations have nothing to do with an optimally designed compensation scheme.